It was a quiet morning in New York City. The sun had just started to rise, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The streets were waking up slowly, shopkeepers opening their stores, children running to school, and cars filling the roads. In one small corner of the city lived Mrs. Clara, a kind old woman in her 70s. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. She lived alone in a tiny apartment, but was never really alone. Every morning, she fed stray cats, helped her neighbors carry groceries, and smiled at everyone she met. People called her Grandma Clara. That morning, Clara put on her warm sweater, picked up her shopping bag, and decided to visit the local market. She needed milk, bread, and some vegetables. Her steps were slow, but her heart was full of peace. She loved her routine. It made her feel alive as she walked down the street. She noticed a small crowd gathered near a corner. Something unusual was happening. She could hear loud voices, angry shouts, and the sound of a young boy crying. Her heart started to beat faster. Curious and worried, Clara moved closer. 2 police officers were standing near a teenage boy who looked terrified. His clothes were dirty, and his backpack lay open on the ground. One officer was shouting, "Where did you steal this from?" The boy shook his head quickly. "I didn't steal anything, sir. It's mine, I promise." Clara stopped for a moment. She didn't know what really happened, but something didn't feel right. The boy looked too scared, too innocent. People around were watching, but no one was saying a word. Some were recording on their phones, whispering to each other. Clara took a deep breath. She couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Slowly, she stepped forward and said in a soft voice, "Officers, please. Maybe there's a mistake." The boy looked scared. "Let him speak." The younger officer turned to her, annoyed. "Ma'am, please step back. This is none of your business." But Clara didn't move. "He's just a child," she said. "You can talk to him kindly." "Violence will not solve anything." The officer frowned. His face turned red with anger. "I said, step back." He shouted louder this time. Clara raised her hand slightly as if asking for calm. "You don't need to shout," she whispered. "I'm just trying to help." The officer suddenly lost his patience. He pushed her arm away harder than he meant to. Clara stumbled backward and fell to the ground. Her shopping bag dropped and fruits rolled onto the street. The crowd gasped. The old woman tried to sit up, pain spreading through her arm. Why did you do that?" she whispered in shock. Phones started recording. Someone shouted, "She's an old woman." "What are you doing?" The second officer looked nervous. "Hey, calm down," he said to his partner. But it was too late. The crowd was growing angry. People yelled at the police. Some stepped forward, but fear held them back. A man from the crowd clenched his fists. His face was half hidden under a hood, but his eyes burned with anger. He watched as the old woman struggled to get up. Then, in a deep voice, he said, "That's enough." The people around turned to see who spoke. The man slowly pulled down his hood. The light fell on his face. It was Mike Tyson, the heavyweight legend. The man known for his power was standing there in disbelief. For a few seconds, the whole street went silent. Even the police froze. Tyson's eyes moved from the crying old woman to the officers. His jaw tightened. He took a step forward. The sound of his voice broke the silence. "You think this is how you protect people?" he said, his tone calm but dangerous. The officers exchanged nervous glances. The crowd started whispering louder now. "It's Mike Tyson." "Oh my God, it's really him." Tyson moved closer to Clara, helping her up gently. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he asked. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I'm fine, thank you," she whispered. The tension in the air was heavy. Everyone could feel that something big was about to happen. The street was filled with tension. Everyone's eyes were now on the same man, Mike Tyson. The air felt heavy, almost silent, except for the faint sound of car horns in the distance. The police officers looked confused. They didn't expect a world-famous boxer to appear in the middle of a street argument. Mike helped the old woman, Clara, stand up. He brushed the dust off her sweater and said gently, "You're okay now, ma'am. Don't worry, She nodded slowly, still trembling. The people watching began to whisper louder. Some held their phones high, recording every second. One of the officers, a younger one with a sharp face and angry eyes, took a step forward. "Sir, please stay out of this. This is a police matter." Mike turned toward him calmly. "A police matter?" he said, his voice deep and steady. "Is it also your job to push old women on the ground?" The officer's face turned red. "She interfered with our work." "Your work?" Mike asked. "Your work is to protect people, not hurt them." The crowd cheered. People shouted, "Yeah, he's right," and "Shame on you." Phones kept flashing, capturing the moment. The older officer, who seemed more nervous, tried to calm things down. "Mr. Tyson, please. We don't want any trouble here. Let's just handle this properly." Mike shook his head slowly. "Trouble already started when you laid hands on her," he said. His eyes were focused, calm, but burning with anger. Clara held Mike's arm softly. "It's okay, sir," she said in a weak voice. "I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me." Mike looked at her kindly. "No one's getting hurt," he promised. Then he looked back at the police. "But someone has to learn respect today." The younger officer clenched his fists. "Are you threatening us?" he asked loudly. Mike smiled slightly, a calm but dangerous smile. "No," he said. "I don't need to threaten anyone. The truth is enough." The officer stepped closer, trying to look strong. "Back off, sir. I'm warning you," the crowd gasped. Everyone knew this was a mistake. You don't warn Mike Tyson like that. Tyson didn't move. His face stayed calm, his body still. The tension was thick. One wrong move could explode everything. Then a small voice came from behind the crowd. "Please stop." It was the teenage boy, the same one the officers had accused earlier. His eyes were full of fear and guilt. "She didn't do anything wrong," he shouted. "She was only helping me." All eyes turned to him. The officer's jaw tightened. "Quiet, kid," he shouted, but it was too late. The truth was out. People in the crowd began to shout angrily. "She tried to help the boy," someone yelled. "You attacked an innocent woman." The younger officer's hands shook slightly. He could feel control slipping away. The older one grabbed his shoulder. "Stop," he whispered urgently. "We're on camera." Mike looked around at the crowd, then back at Clara and the boy. "See," he said quietly. "People don't forget. Cameras don't lie." Younger officer muttered something under his breath, still angry. He turned as if to walk away, but his pride stopped him. He faced Mike again and said harshly, "You think being famous gives you power over us?" Mike's eyes narrowed. "No," he said softly, "but being human should give us all some decency." The crowd cheered again. Someone yelled, "Respect!" Another shouted, "Tyson's a hero!" At that moment, a police car pulled up fast. A senior officer stepped out. Gray hair, serious face, full authority. He looked around, confused by the noise and flashing lights. "What's going on here?" he demanded. The older officer quickly explained, "Sir, there was a misunderstanding." The senior officer looked at Tyson, and his face changed. "Mr. Tyson?" he said in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Mike pointed at Clara. "Saving someone you should have protected." The senior officer looked at the old woman, then at his team. His expression turned cold. "Is this true?" he asked quietly. No one answered. The silence was heavy again. Tyson folded his arms, waiting. The crowd held its breath. Finally, the senior officer sighed. "Everyone calm down," he said firmly. "No more shouting. We'll sort this out right now," but it was already too late. The videos were spreading online, and the world was about to see what had really happened. The crowd had gone quiet again. Everyone was waiting to see what Mike Tyson would do next. The flashing blue and red lights from the police cars danced across his face. His eyes were calm, but his jaw was tight. Inside, he was boiling with anger. The senior officer, a man named Captain Harris, looked at Tyson and spoke carefully. "Mr. Tyson, please, we don't want a scene here. Let us handle this the right way." Tyson took a slow breath. "The right way?" he repeated. You mean the way your men pushed an old woman to the ground? Harris glanced at the two officers, who now looked guilty and nervous. The younger one avoided eye contact. Sir, she got in the way, he muttered quietly. Tyson turned his head sharply toward him. In the way of what? He asked. In the way of your pride? The crowd murmured in agreement. Phones were still recording. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Clara stood next to Tyson, holding her injured arm. Please, she said softly. I just wanted to help the boy. I didn't mean any harm. Her voice cracked, and the crowd's anger grew. A woman shouted, She's telling the truth. Another man yelled, We saw everything. The young officer took a step forward, clearly frustrated. Everyone back off. He shouted. His voice shook. You're making this worse. Tyson stepped between the officer and Clara, his large frame blocking her completely. You've done enough already, he said in a low, cold voice. The officer stared up at Tyson. He looked small compared to the heavyweight legend. Don't test me, he hissed. Tyson's expression didn't change. I'm not here to fight you, he said slowly. I'm here to stop you. The words hit hard. The officer's hand twitched near his belt, not to pull a weapon, but to look in control. The crowd gasped. People began shouting again. Put your hands down. Dante, touch him. Let the woman go. Captain Harris raised his hand, trying to calm everyone. Stop. All of you, stop, he shouted, but Tyson's focus never left the young officer. Look around, he said quietly. All these people, they don't fear criminals anymore. They fear the ones wearing badges. The words cut deep. The young officer looked down, guilt flickering in his eyes. Tyson turned toward Clara. Let's get you to a doctor, he said. But before they could move, another police car arrived. News reporters had already caught wind of what was happening. Cameras flashed from behind the tape line. Tyson could hear them shouting, Mike Tyson saves old woman. Police violence caught on camera. It was chaos. Captain Harris sighed deeply. He knew there was no hiding what had happened. Take the old woman to the hospital, he ordered one of his men quietly. And get that boy's statement. Tyson nodded in approval. Good, he said. At least someone's doing the right thing. The young officer finally broke his silence. You think you're a hero, Tyson? He snapped. You think just because you're famous, people will always believe you? Tyson slowly turned back. His expression changed from anger to pure calm. No, he said. I'm not a hero. I'm just not afraid to do what's right. The crowd erupted in applause. People chanted his name, Tyson, Tyson. While the reporters filmed every second, Clara looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. You saved me. Tyson smiled softly. No, ma'am. I just did what any man should do. As the police helped Clara into an ambulance, Tyson stood still, watching her go. The siren faded into the distance. Leaving behind only the murmurs of the crowd and the flashing lights, Captain Harris walked up beside him. Mr. Tyson, he said, I'll make sure this doesn't get buried. Tyson nodded. See that it doesn't, he replied, because next time, the world won't just watch, it will remember. The senior officer looked down, ashamed. The younger one stood frozen, realizing the weight of what he had done. Tyson turned to leave. The cameras followed him as he walked away down the dim street, strong, silent, and unshaken. The crowd slowly began to cheer again. For a moment, hope filled the air. Hope that maybe one man's courage could still make a difference. The night air grew heavier. The flashing lights from the police cars painted the street in red and blue. The crowd had grown larger now, filled with people recording, whispering, and waiting to see what would happen next. Mike Tyson stood still in the middle of it all, calm on the outside, fire on the inside. His hands were relaxed by his sides, but his eyes were locked on the young officer who had pushed the old woman earlier. Captain Harris was talking to his men, trying to fix the situation before it went completely out of control, but the damage was already done. The internet was watching. Dozens of live videos were already spreading online. Tyson looked around. Clara was gone, taken safely in the ambulance. The boy who had been accused earlier stood near the crowd, holding his torn backpack. His eyes were full of gratitude and fear. Tyson called out to him. "Hey, kid. You okay?" The boy nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. Thank you," good Tyson said. "Always tell the truth. Don't be scared of people who abuse their power." The boy tried to smile, but his lips trembled. The truth of the moment was too big for him to process. Suddenly, the young officer broke the silence. "Enough of this," he shouted. "You think you can walk in here and embarrass us? Who do you think you are?" The crowd gasped. Tyson turned his head slowly toward him. "You really want to know?" he asked quietly. The officer stepped closer, anger in his eyes. "You don't control this street, Tyson. You don't control the law." Tyson's voice stayed calm. "Then maybe you should learn what the law actually means." The tension snapped like a wire. The officer grabbed Tyson's arm roughly. "You're under arrest for interfering with police duty," he yelled. Gasps and screams filled the air. Cameras zoomed in. Tyson didn't resist. He just stared straight into the officer's eyes, his voice low but powerful. "Be careful what you're doing right now," he said. "The world is watching." The officer hesitated, his grip loosening slightly. He could feel the pressure from the crowd, hundreds of eyes burning into him. Captain Harris rushed forward. "Stop," he ordered. "Let him go. Right now." The young officer stepped back reluctantly, breathing hard. "He's provoking us," he shouted. "No," Harris snapped. "You're provoking everyone here." The senior officer turned to Tyson, his tone firm but respectful. "Mr. Tyson, I apologize again. This situation has gone too far." Tyson nodded slowly, but didn't relax. "You don't need to apologize to me," he said. "Apologize to the woman you hurt." The officer looked down. "We will," Harris said. "I promise." But the crowd wasn't calming down. People were chanting, "Justice for Clara! Justice for Clara!" The sound grew louder, echoing through the night. Reporters pushed forward, microphones out, shouting questions. "Mr. Tyson? What happened here? Did the police attack an old woman? Are you pressing charges?" Tyson raised one hand for silence. The noise slowly faded. "Listen," he said, his voice deep and steady. "This isn't about me. It's about what's right. When people in power stop protecting others, we lose trust. And when we lose trust, we lose everything." Crowd clapped. Some even cried. The officer who had started it all looked shaken, his confidence gone. He muttered something, but his voice was drowned out by the people cheering Tyson's name. Tyson turned to leave, but Harris called out, "Wait." Harris sighed. "You're right," he said. "We messed up tonight. I'll make sure this doesn't disappear. The report will be clean and public." Tyson nodded. "Make sure it's not just a report," he said. "Make it a lesson." Started walking away. The cameras followed him, the crowd moving aside to give him space. The sound of his footsteps echoed on the wet pavement as he reached the end of the street. The reporter shouted one last question. "Mr. Tyson, why did you get involved?" He paused and looked over his shoulder. "Because silence," he said softly, "is the friend of injustice." Then he walked away into the darkness. The legend, the fighter, the protector. The night didn't forget his words. Neither did the world. The next morning, the world woke up to chaos. Not on the streets, but on the internet. Thousands of videos flooded social media. Every clip showed the same scene: an old woman on the ground, frightened and hurt, and a man standing tall between her and the police. Mike Tyson. The headlines were everywhere. Tyson saves old woman from police brutality. Hero in gloves. Mike Tyson steps up again. People couldn't stop talking. Some called him a hero. Others called him a legend reborn. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Clara and hashtag Tyson the Protector trended worldwide. Meanwhile, in a small hospital room, Clara was lying in bed. Her arm was wrapped in a bandage, and her eyes were tired but calm. She had watched the video too, tears rolling down her cheeks. She couldn't believe the whole world was talking about her. The nurse entered and smiled gently. "You're famous now, Grandma Clara," she said. "Everyone's praying for you." Clara chuckled softly. "No, my dear," she said. "They're praying for goodness. That's what the world needs." Outside the hospital, reporters waited for Tyson, but he wasn't looking for cameras. He came quietly, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, holding a small bouquet of flowers. He didn't want fame. He wanted peace. When he entered the room, Clara smiled immediately. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. Tyson placed the flowers beside her bed. "Of course I did," he replied. "You remind me of my mother. She always stood up for others too." Clara's eyes filled with emotion. "You saved me," she whispered. Tyson shook his head. "No, ma'am. You saved all of us," he said. "You showed the world that being brave doesn't depend on age or strength. It depends on the heart." She smiled weakly. "And you showed that true strength is kindness." At that moment, Captain Harris entered the room. He looked serious, but respectful. His hat was in his hands. "Mrs. Clara," he said, "I'm truly sorry for what happened. Those officers have been suspended and are under investigation." Clara nodded slowly. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I just want people to learn." Harris looked down. "They will," he promised. Then he turned to Tyson. "And thank you, sir. You reminded us what our job really means." Tyson nodded. "Just make sure it never happens again," he said. The conversation was short but heavy, full of truth. Harris left quietly, and for a while, the room was silent, except for the sound of the heart monitor. Outside, people had gathered holding signs that read, "Respect the elderly. Justice for Clara." "Thank you." Tyson, it wasn't a protest, it was unity. People of all ages stood together, proving that goodness still existed in the world. Later that evening, Tyson gave a short interview outside the hospital. Cameras surrounded him, but he stayed calm and humble. "Mr. Tyson," a reporter asked, "why did you step in?" Most people would have just recorded the video and walked away. Tyson looked straight into the camera. "Because recording doesn't change anything," he said. "Action does. We all say the world is cruel, but the world becomes what we allow it to be." The reporters went silent. Those words spread online within minutes, shared millions of times. People called it the Tyson quote. That night, Clara's hospital room filled with flowers and letters from strangers. Children drew pictures of her with Tyson, calling them real-life heroes. Before leaving, Tyson visited her one last time. "You'll be home soon," he said with a gentle smile. Clara nodded. "And you'll keep fighting?" He smiled wider. "Always." As he walked out into the cold evening, people applauded softly. He didn't wave or pose, he just smiled and disappeared into the crowd, like a guardian who had done his duty. The world would move on. As it always does, but something had changed. People had seen courage that didn't need a ring or a title. They had seen kindness that fought back, and in that quiet moment, the city learned something powerful. A single act of humanity can shake the whole world. A week had passed since that unforgettable night. The streets of New York were calm again. But the story of Mike Tyson and Grandma Clara still echoed everywhere in homes, schools, TV shows. And across every phone screen on the planet, news channels replayed the same clip, the moment Tyson helped the old woman and stood up to the police. The video had been viewed more than 50 million times. Even people who didn't know who Tyson was now called him the man with the golden heart. Across the world, people shared stories of kindness, inspired by that one act. A bus driver in Chicago stopped to help an old man cross the street. A young boy in London gave food to a homeless woman. And in small towns everywhere, people whispered the same words, "Be like Tyson." But Tyson himself didn't want fame. He stayed quiet, avoiding interviews and cameras. He spent most of his days training young kids in a small boxing gym in Brooklyn, kids who came from tough neighborhoods, kids who needed hope. One afternoon, as the gym buzzed with the sound of gloves hitting punching bags, a small voice came from the door. "Mr. Tyson." He turned around. Standing there was Clara, wearing a neat blue coat and holding a walking stick. She looked healthier, her smile brighter. "Mrs. Clara," Tyson said in surprise. "You're walking again." She laughed softly. "A little slower than before," she said, "but still walking." He helped her sit on a bench. The children in the gym stopped training and whispered to each other, recognizing the woman from the video. Tyson introduced her proudly. "Kids," he said, "this is the bravest lady I've ever met." The kids clapped, and Clara blushed. "Oh, stop it," she said gently. "I only did what anyone would do." Tyson smiled. "That's what makes it special." After the laughter settled, Clara looked around the gym. "So many young faces," she said. "Do they know what kindness looks like?" Tyson nodded slowly. "They're learning. Not just how to fight, but when not to." Clara smiled again. "That's the real fight, isn't it?" He nodded. "Always." As they talked, a news reporter entered quietly. She had been searching for Tyson for days, trying to get one last interview. She held a camera but didn't switch it on yet. "Mr. Tyson," she said softly, "the world wants to hear from you. People are saying your story changed how they see courage. Would you like to say something to them?" Tyson looked at Clara, then at the kids. He thought for a moment, then he nodded. "All right," he said, "but this message isn't just from me." The camera light turned on. The gym went silent. Tyson stood beside Clara and looked straight into the lens. He spoke slowly, his voice calm, but full of strength. "A week ago, I saw something that broke my heart. A good person getting hurt for trying to help. And I realized the problem isn't that bad people have power. It's that good people stay silent." He paused for a moment. The room was still. The kids listened like they were hearing history. "Kindness is not weakness," he continued. "Standing up for someone doesn't make you a hero, it makes you human. You don't need fame, or gloves, or cameras. You just need a heart that can't stay quiet." Clara wiped a tear from her eye. The kids clapped softly. Tyson turned to her and smiled. "The world listened to you, Grandma Clara," he said. "They just didn't know it yet." She laughed through her tears. "And they listened to you because you gave them a reason to." The reporter ended the recording, tears in her eyes. That short clip, just 2 minutes long, went viral within hours. People called it the message that shook the world. Tyson never watched it again. He didn't need to. He knew its power wasn't in his words, but in the truth behind them. Days later, murals appeared across cities, paintings of Tyson and Clara, standing together under the words, "Strength protects. Kindness heals." And somewhere in the quiet streets of New York, an old woman smiled as children passed by her window, helping one another, proof that one act of courage could change the way the world sees humanity. The end.